So I don't know if I can call this shoe a retro. I mean, it is a retro. Converse have brought back a shoe that we do not see brought back all that often. But there's a twist. This shoe isn't exactly like the original. But when it looks this good, who cares? Right? In this video, I want to talk about the Converse Weapon CX. Let's get into it. I think absence really does make the heart grow fonder. If we don't see something that often, we tend to fall in love with it even more when it comes out, only because we haven't seen it, and so we feel like we need to jump at the chance to get it, because who knows how long it'll stick around for. And sometimes when a classic is brought back in a way that's different from the original, it might not be that well received, and so it can then influence whether or not the shoe will be brought back again. The original Weapon is a symbol of Converse's dominance in the absolute heyday of 80s basketball. The Weapon was originally released in 1986 and was worn by legends Larry Bird and Magic Johnson. The shoe was worn by just about everyone playing in the NBA at some point in the late 80s. That might be a bit of an exaggeration, but I'm trying to get across just how many people were playing in this shoe. Well, everyone except for Michael Jordan, because we know he had his own shoes. The Weapon is the evolution of the Converse performance shoe that was built for the courts. We all know about the Chuck Taylor. It is a shoe that lives on today. And we also should know that its roots are in performance basketball. It was a staple on the court. That shoe evolved into the Pro Leather, which is one of my favorite looking shoes of all time. I've got a lot of those, so you might hear that a lot on the channel. And the Weapon is what came after the Converse Pro Leather. The Converse Weapon CX that we have in 2021, like I said at the start of the video, isn't like the Weapon that we would remember from 1986 and the late 80s and any subsequent releases in the original form. If you are familiar with the original Weapon, as soon as you look at the Weapon CX, you will immediately notice that there is a lot going on down below that has never been in the Weapon before. The midsole and outsole setups, but aesthetically they've had quite an impact to the overall silhouette of the Weapon. I can appreciate though that the design of the midsole does take us a little bit out of Nostalgiaville. I'm not totally mad about these changes though. I think the changes have been made really well. They still fit really nicely with the proportions of the shoe, and I think from a comfort perspective, the tech upgrades that we're seeing in the Weapon CX are better suited for the types of wear we're likely to use the Weapon in these days, which is pretty much casual. Going into the changes underfoot, starting with the outsole, we've got a different tread pattern than what was in the original Weapon. The tread pattern that we've got on the Weapon CX is more lifestyle friendly. I've really got no complaints about it. I think it looks good. I don't see any issues with it from a lifestyle perspective, and I quite like the use of two types of colors in the rubber that they've used here. The rubber itself is also quite thick, so I think from a durability perspective, this will go the distance. Into the midsole, and this is where the Weapon CX really sets itself apart from the original weapon. There is an exaggerated looking midsole here that looks almost like a double stacked type of foam setup. But there's only one type of foam here, and that is the CX foam. And it feels really good underfoot. I've worn these briefly out and about, and I've got to say they feel really nice and more comfortable than a pair of Chuck Taylors are. That's obviously because we've got a lot more padding and a really nice sock liner in these guys. The changes to the midsole have kind of been done with comfort in mind, and they haven't really stuffed up the design all that much in doing it, so I think the trade-off there has paid off. As far as the upper goes, we have a really nicely padded collar area that gives heaps of comfort. We've got this Y-bar around the heel for some stability and support. That was iconic to the weapon when it was released in 1986, and like we saw on the original weapon, we've got the Converse branding done with the chevron and the star. The tongue itself is oversized and is in a textile material. In the box for this colorway, the egret, wild mango and twill colorway, you get two types of laces. So you get the ones that I've got on this guy, which are kind of like this twill or egret or whatever color it is, and then you get a lighter shade of laces as well. And as far as the materials go, we've got a nice feeling leather that is wrapping around the rest of the upper. The upper has really retained the original look of the weapon. With the fit, I would go your true to size, not the size that you would buy a pair of Chuck Taylors in. So if you're familiar with buying Chucks, you normally size down a full size from whatever size you typically buy your sneakers in. That's not the case with the Weapon CX. I would go with whatever your regular size shoe size is. There are 3 colorways that have been released on launch. There was an all white, the incredibly retro looking black and white, and then these guys, the egret, twill and wild mango colorway. I couldn't decide between these and the retro look of the black and white colorway, so I bought both. The Weapon CX retail for $200 Australian dollars, and I think that's really reasonable for what you're getting. You're getting a shoe that isn't released all that often. It's made in some really nice materials, and there have been some changes that have really upped the comfort stakes to the point where you won't be mad about wearing these shoes on a daily basis. I'm interested in your thoughts. What do you guys think of the Weapon CX? Are you here for it, or are you kind of mad about the changes that they've made? Let me know in the comments below, but until the next video, laters.